After 14 years of building our family company from the ground up, my sister gave my job to her boyfriend. Just like that. But that wasn't even the worst part. The silence, the meetings behind my back, the feeling that everyone knew except me. And now I'm wondering, how long had they been planning this? Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment. I want to know who's hearing my story. The morning sun bounced off the glass facade of Shipley & Company as I pushed open the front doors. Everything looked the same. The marble tile still gleamed, the receptionist still greeted me with that too wide smile, and the boardroom down the hallway still smelled like leather and too many egos. I'd walked this same hallway for 14 years. My heels practically left a groove in the floor. But something was off today. No one looked me in the eye. That was the first clue. I reached for the conference room door, and my hand froze when I saw Darla, my younger sister, already seated at the head of the table. Her posture screamed something I couldn't quite name yet. Confident, maybe. Territorial. Lyle, her boyfriend, sat to her right. He was smirking like he just won something, and I hadn't even known there was a competition. I stepped into the room, slow and deliberate, and offered a polite smile to the board members scattered around the table. Nobody smiled back. "Morning," I said, setting my notepad down at the chair that had always been mine, just left of the head seat. Lyle was the one to speak, voice bright, oily. "Maura, glad you could make it." Something in my gut twisted. "This is the quarterly leadership meeting, isn't it?" Darla folded her hands neatly. "It is, but we're starting with an announcement today." I looked around, my jaw tightening. These people had eaten cake at my wedding. I'd pulled some of them through 2 recessions and a lawsuit. Now they all looked like interns waiting for the next email to hit. Darla cleared her throat. "Effective immediately, Lyle will serve as interim CEO during the next phase of company restructuring. This decision comes with full support from the board." I blinked. Not because I hadn't heard her, but because the sentence was so rehearsed, it barely felt real. I looked to the chairman, Mr. Fielding, praying for him to correct her, but he only nodded. Like this had been rehearsed. Approved, sealed. Lyle stood up and held out his hand to me across the table. "Big shoes to fill, Maura. We'll do our best to keep your legacy intact." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stared at that outstretched hand like it was a dead fish. Legacy? Like I was already dead? I slowly straightened in my seat, my mind racing, cataloging everything. The months Darla had been staying late to help. The way she'd started attending high-level meetings I'd never invited her to. The offhand comments Lyle made about bringing new energy into the company. It had been happening, right in front of me, and I hadn't seen it. The air in the room thickened. Darla's face was blank, too blank, controlled, and smug. For a second, my chest ached, not from anger but something colder, a kind of mourning. I had built this company with my father. From the first client to the first office space to the first quarter in the black, I was the one who'd slept on that damn couch in the break room. Darla had only come back 3 years ago, after tanking a boutique venture in Chicago and begging our father for a second chance. And now, she'd taken everything. I let my eyes scan the agenda packet. My name was gone. Not a single mention. It was like I'd never existed in this room. They didn't just take my job. They erased me. I pushed back my chair. The scrape echoed. Every eye in the room followed me. "If this is the decision," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage, "then you'll receive my formal response in writing." Lyle opened his mouth, probably to throw in one last smirk, but I beat him to it. "No need to wish me luck," I said. "Luck's never been the reason I've made it this far." I turned to walk out. Halfway to the door, I heard his voice behind me, trying to reclaim the moment. "No hard feelings, Maura. It's just business." I paused with my hand on the doorframe and exhaled once, low and steady. "No," I said, "it's never just business when family draws the knife." And I walked out without looking back. In the elevator, my legs started shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of it all hit like a punch to the chest. I'd just been ousted by my own blood, and every person I thought would speak up had chosen silence. But the strange thing was, beneath the ache, there was clarity. I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just betrayed. I was awake now. They hadn't just fired me. They'd declared war. I didn't even remember the drive home. I must have made it on muscle memory. Left on Prospect, right past the train tracks, a slow cruise through the old downtown stretch where everything still looked the same, even though nothing was. The sun was dipping low by the time I turned my key in the lock. The apartment greeted me with its usual stillness. Just silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that fills a space when something enormous has just been ripped out of your life and left a vacuum behind. I tossed my keys on the console table, kicked off my heels, and stared at the unopened bottle of red wine on the kitchen counter. The one I'd been saving for my 15th work anniversary. I cracked the seal without thinking, poured a heavy glass, and sat at the dining table without even turning on the lights. The shadows matched my mood just fine. No missed calls, no voicemails, no email from HR, not even a "sorry things turned out this way" from the board. And nothing from my father. That one stung more than I cared to admit. I took a slow sip, letting the bitterness settle. The worst part wasn't the firing, it was the coordinated silence. They wanted me to disappear quietly, fade out like background noise. I was beginning to realize that had been the plan all along. My phone buzzed, slicing through the stillness. It was a text from Darla. "I didn't want it to happen this way, but you always leave me no choice. You don't trust me. You never did." I stared at the screen, blinking once, twice. That's what she had to say? No apology, no explanation, just that, like it was my fault, like she'd been forced to gut me out of my own company. "You always do this to me." Those words, God. She'd said them before. I could hear her voice echoing from the past, dripping with self-pity and venom dressed as vulnerability. Back when we were kids, she'd use them whenever she didn't get her way. When Mom refused to let her wear my clothes, when she crashed my high school graduation party with her drama, when she blamed me for Dad not investing in her doomed boutique in Chicago. Darla had never been told no without turning it into a declaration of war. I didn't respond to her text. I didn't need to. Instead, I set the phone down, stood, and crossed the room to the bookshelf. Tucked behind some old trade magazines and photo frames was a notebook I hadn't opened in years, leather-bound. My initials embossed in the corner. It was the journal I used back when we were first scaling the company. Notes, wins, names, losses. And now it would hold something else, a record. Not for them, for me. I opened it, wrote the date, and started listing everything. Every shady thing I'd overheard the last few months, every meeting I was excluded from, every board member who used to call me the heart of the company, and now couldn't look me in the eye. I documented Darla's sudden access to financial files she never used to touch. And I jotted down Lyle's timeline too. When he started dating Darla, when he advised on our digital systems upgrade, and when he stopped showing up as just her plus one and started showing up in strategy meetings. There were patterns, so many I hadn't wanted to admit before. But the truth was, they'd been circling this move for a while. I'd just been too focused on the work to see it coming. I ran my fingers along the edge of the table and closed my eyes, letting my thoughts drift back 5 years. Darla had shown up in Dad's office one afternoon, practically vibrating with ambition. She had this whole presentation printed out. Charts, projections, slogans for what she called a new design era. She wanted full control of the design wing, said she'd modernize it, make us trend-driven and lean. Said I was stuck in old-school relationships and artisan loyalty. Dad had asked for my thoughts. I told him honestly, she didn't understand our clients, and she'd never last under pressure. He agreed, politely declined her offer. I still remember the look she gave me as she left the room that day, like I'd stolen something from her, like I was standing in a spotlight that she believed should have been hers. "You're always the golden child," she muttered when she passed me in the hall. I had laughed it off back then, told myself she'd get over it. Clearly, she hadn't. I stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere across town, Darla was probably celebrating. Maybe Lyle was pouring champagne. Maybe she'd already claimed my office, replaced my framed photos with her motivational quotes and Pinterest boards. But here's the thing she never understood. I didn't build my reputation with hashtags and talking points. I built it one relationship at a time. Clients who called me at midnight when their timeline slipped. Teams who stayed late because they believed in what we were doing. Vendors who gave us discounts because I treated them like people, not levers. Darla could take my title. She could even hijack the company's future. But she couldn't rewrite what I'd already done. Not without me giving her the pen. I picked up the journal again, flipped to a fresh page, and at the top I wrote, Phase 1. Because if she thought I'd walk away quietly, she really doesn't know me. By the time Sunday turned to Monday, the fog of anger had lifted, replaced by something sharper. I wasn't just going to journal my pain, I was going to investigate it. I got up before sunrise, dressed like I was still walking into Shipley & Co. Blazer, dark jeans, low heels, and made my way to a quiet cafe downtown. It was a spot I used to love before the office swallowed my life. The place smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. I found a corner seat by the window, opened my laptop, and logged into my archived email. If they were going to paint me as the problem, I needed to see the brushstrokes. I started with the quarterly reports. Numbers were supposed to be clean, black and white. But as I scanned through the last 2 quarters' data Lyle had presented to the board, something immediately felt off. The profit margins under my leadership looked worse than I remembered. Much worse. I opened my original records, documents I had backed up religiously to my cloud folder every Friday like clockwork. The figures didn't match, not even close. In Lyle's slide deck, our Q1 revenue had taken a nosedive, but in my files, Q1 had actually finished ahead of projections by 12%. He had pulled several vendor payments from Q2 and reassigned them into Q1 to inflate our expenses and flatten the margin. It wasn't just wrong. It was coordinated, deliberate. He twisted the data to make it look like I was mismanaging funds, bleeding the company. And the board bought it. I sat back in my chair, heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just a hostile takeover. This was a setup. Scrolling deeper, I pulled up expense logs. One name stood out, showing up in repeated entries across multiple departments. New Edge Interiors. At first glance, it looked legitimate. A design consultant firm. But I'd never worked with them. Ever. Curious, I opened a separate tab and Googled them. No website, no images, no social media footprint. Just a P.O. box listed in the footer of an archived invoice. When I plugged that into a property registry site, my stomach flipped. That address had once belonged to an LLC Lyle operated out of Chicago. A boutique renovation firm that vanished the moment he and Darla started dating. He created a ghost vendor. He was billing Shipley and Company through a shell company, inflating fake supplier charges and rerouting funds. And he used my name, my department, my projects, to push those payments through while I was busy leading actual clients. I stared at the screen, rage and disbelief twisting inside me like a storm. This wasn't just about stealing my role. He weaponized my reputation to commit fraud and framed me as incompetent to justify it. I clicked into a PDF of one particular invoice, $12,800 billed for consulting and material recommendation. The signature line at the bottom was marked, approved by Maura Shipley. Only I'd never seen this invoice before, never signed it. And if Lyle was forging approvals in my name, that wasn't just unethical. That was criminal. I started printing every invoice, every mismatch. I labeled a folder, chain of manipulation, and backed it up to a flash drive and 3 separate cloud folders. Then I opened my phone, scrolled to Fern's contact and typed, "Need to meet, discreetly. Something's wrong. And it's not just about me getting pushed out." Fern was sharp. Loyal, too. She'd been my office manager for almost 8 years before Darla convinced her to take some time off right after Lyle joined. I had a hunch Fern knew more than she'd ever admitted in public. Within 2 minutes, she replied, "Tell me when. I've been waiting for this." That reply alone told me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone either. As I gathered my things, the barista handed me a refill without asking. "Looks like you're solving something serious over there," she said. I smiled faintly, sliding my flash drive into my coat pocket. "Something like that." I walked out into the morning light with the first flicker of clarity in days. I wasn't some spurned executive licking her wounds. I was a witness. And now, I had evidence. If Lyle thought erasing me would make it easier to cover his tracks, he had underestimated me in the worst way. Because he didn't just twist numbers. He used my name to do it. And now, I'm going to use his name to end it. I left the cafe just before noon and spent the rest of the day combing through everything again. By 6:45 p.m., my living room floor looked like a crime board. Papers everywhere, highlighter ink bleeding into printed contracts, and a glass of untouched water going warm beside me. Fern's place was just across town. I hadn't seen her since the restructuring, but we'd texted now and then. Safe, surface-level things. She'd gone quiet after Darla started bringing Lyle around to meetings, and now I understood why. I drove without music, parked 2 blocks from her duplex just to be cautious, and knocked twice. Fern opened the door without a word and ushered me in, pulling the blinds closed behind her. She looked tired. Not in the I didn't sleep way, but in the I've seen too much and had to keep it inside way. "Did you bring it?" she asked. I held up the flash drive. She nodded, motioning to the dining table where her laptop was already open. "I've got something too." She pulled out a manila folder thick with printouts and circled notes. My heart sped up as she flipped through them. Internal memos, approvals routed through backdoor accounts, and buried in the middle, a PDF marked Howard Shipley Executive Authorization. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what it was. I clicked it open anyway. It was a vendor approval form. New Edge Interiors, $19,400 for executive design consulting. Signed, digitally, by my father. Date, 4 days ago. "He's been in and out of post-op care since last month," I said slowly. "He can't even drive, let alone sign approvals." Fern leaned in. "Keep going. Look at the metadata." I clicked the document properties. The IP address logged under the signature didn't trace back to the hospital or to my dad's condo in Estes Park. It traced directly to Shipley & Co.'s internal network, to Lyle's workstation. "He forged my dad's signature," I whispered. "More than once," Fern added. "I flagged at least 6 other approvals with Howard's name on them, all tied to vendors we've never used before, all approved since your access was revoked." My chest constricted. This wasn't just a professional takedown anymore. It was personal, familial, vicious. "He didn't just erase me," I said. "He used my father, played him like a chess piece." Fern's voice was tight. "You need to tell Howard, tonight." I nodded, already standing. "Send me those files, every one." She looked up, cautious. You going to confront him directly? I'm not going to let him hear it from a subpoena. The drive to Estes Park felt longer than usual, even though the roads were clear. My mind kept replaying every interaction between Lyle and my father. How charming he'd always tried to be, how deferential. The handshakes, the fake interest in woodworking. All of it had been bait. Howard was in his recliner, a blanket over his knees and a crossword half finished in his lap. He looked thinner than I remembered. Maura, he smiled. This is a surprise. I didn't smile back. I sat across from him, pulled out my iPad, and opened the file. Dad, did you sign this? He squinted, adjusting his glasses. New Edge? What's that? It's a vendor Lyle's been using to route charges through the company. His brow furrowed. I haven't signed anything in weeks, maybe months, and I've never heard of that vendor. I rotated the screen toward him. That's your signature. He stared at it, eyes narrowing. That's not mine. Dad, I said gently, he's been using your name. The color drained from his face. His hand trembled as he reached for the glass of water beside him, and then, suddenly, his eyes rolled, and he slumped forward. Dad! I jumped from the chair, catching his shoulders before he slid to the floor. His pulse thudded weakly under my fingers. I called 911, voice shaking, breath too tight to focus. The ambulance arrived within 6 minutes, but it felt like 6 hours. At the hospital, they said it was a stress-triggered collapse. His blood pressure had spiked dangerously. He'd be okay, but they were keeping him overnight. I sat outside his room, shoulders rigid, spine locked against the vinyl chair. I kept thinking, if I'd waited another day, if I hadn't shown him that document. But I couldn't regret it, because now I knew the full scope of what Lyle had done. This wasn't just a fraudulent invoice. It was the kind of betrayal that cracked ribs from the inside. He didn't just come for my job. He came for the man who built everything. And that's where the line snapped. They broke the man who built everything. Now, I rebuild, and I take it all back. The week that followed my father's collapse was a blur of antiseptic hospital rooms, insurance forms, and whispered updates from nurses who spoke too gently for my nerves to endure. When Howard finally stabilized and was released to rest at home, I thought I'd finally exhaled. I hadn't. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. Darla had sent a group message inviting close family only for a dinner at Dad's house that evening. No mention of the week's events, no acknowledgement of what had caused them. I knew what it was, a performance. Still, I went. But first I made one stop. I drove to Shipley & Company HQ, parking in the side lot like I always had. The office was mostly dark, save for the server lights glowing faint blue through the lower windows. I walked to the main entrance, swiped my access badge like I had every Monday for over a decade. Nothing. I tried again. No click, no light. I pressed the buzzer. After a pause, the security guard appeared. Mike, someone who used to bring me coffee when I worked past 8 p.m. He didn't even buzz me in. Hey, Maura, I was told not to let you in unless HR clears it first, he said, awkward, apologetic. Said your status changed. My status? I'm sorry. You know I don't make the rules. I nodded once, tight, and walked back to my car. My hands shook only slightly when I dialed HR. The voice that answered didn't even sound surprised. Hi, Maura. How can we help you? I need to collect my personal items. I was a partner. I left equipment, documents, my credentials. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, syrupy and cold. Unfortunately, your records no longer list you as an executive of Shipley & Company. You were formally removed under internal restructuring guidelines. Without a single document? Without a severance? That's not something I can speak to. You're welcome to submit a formal inquiry. Send me a copy of my termination paperwork. We don't have that on file. You were listed as resigned by failure to comply with leadership transition. I almost laughed. They didn't just fire me. They were rewriting the entire narrative, turning me from founder to footnote. Later that evening, I stood in the hallway outside Dad's home, staring at the oak door like it might bite. I could already hear the voices inside, the clink of glasses, Lyle's chuckle. Darla opened the door with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. You made it, she said, stepping aside. I said I would, I replied, brushing past her. Dad was in the living room, legs elevated, blanket across his lap. He looked tired, thinner, but alert. He smiled when he saw me. Hey, kiddo. Hey, Dad. I kissed his cheek and squeezed his hand before moving to the dining room where the rest of them waited. Dinner was roasted chicken, salad, and tension. Darla tapped her wine glass lightly and stood, holding her fork like a microphone. I just want to thank everyone for being here. It means a lot to Dad, and to me. She turned toward me as if we were still sisters sharing a memory. I know the company changes have been hard, but I'm finally doing what's right for Shipley & Company. It's time we stopped relying on the past and started building something that actually lasts. A few people nodded. Someone murmured, well said. I let the silence sit for a second. Then I stood. I'm sorry. What are you building exactly? Because all I see is a shell of a company being used to funnel invoices from vendors that don't exist. She blinked. Maura, let's not make this about business. You made it about business when you broke your own father to get a seat you didn't earn. Her smile cracked. Wow, there it is, the martyr routine. I've spent the last 14 years building that firm. You spent the last 3 sneaking behind my back. Lyle forged documents. He used Dad's name, and you're standing here playing CEO at a dinner party. Maybe you're just upset that the world doesn't revolve around you anymore, she snapped. The room fell deathly quiet. Everyone froze, eyes darting between us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. You don't get to rewrite this story, I said, steady. You don't get to erase me just because you're finally standing where you always wanted. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I turned to my dad. You didn't deserve what they did, but I promise it doesn't end like this. He nodded, silent but clear-eyed. I left before dessert was served. They erased me from the boardroom, but they're about to see what I build outside it. It started quietly. No balloons, no ribbon cutting, no staged social media post. Just a key turning in a lock, and the heavy sigh of a woman who'd spent 14 years building something only to have her name erased from the plaque. The new office was modest. 2 rooms, 1 glass door, and furniture delivered the day before. But it was mine. The lease was signed in my name. The paint on the walls was a shade I chose, and Fern stood by the window, coffee in hand, her presence steady as always. Smells like potential, she said with a wink. I smiled. And probably leftover paint fumes. We spent the morning organizing boxes, booting up laptops, sorting vendor contacts. By 10 o'clock, my inbox began to stir. Clients from my old life had found me. Maura, where are you working now? Do you still handle interiors for medical offices? Whatever you're doing, we want in. I replied with nothing flashy, just clarity. New firm, small team, same standards. At noon, the front door opened with a soft knock. It was Ted Harker, from Mason and Harker Supply, the kind of vendor people overlooked until deadlines loomed. He grinned as he wheeled in 2 carts of lighting equipment. Thought I'd make the first delivery in person, he said. Didn't want to risk them mixing it up with your sister's orders. I blinked. You're working with Darla now? I was, until she started asking for rush delivery without paying the rush fees. He paused, setting down a box. You always paid on time. You respected people's time. That's rare, Maura. People remember that. He handed me a folded receipt. 50% discount. Don't argue. I didn't. After he left, Fern nudged me. Feels good, huh? It feels real. Later that afternoon, I sat down with a fresh cup of tea and checked my inbox again. 1 new message. No name, no subject. Just an anonymous email from a burner address. You didn't deserve what happened. This is what Lyle doesn't want anyone to see. Attached was a zip file. I scanned it 3 times before opening it. Inside were internal Shipley and Company spreadsheets, versions I recognized but with subtle changes. Entire budget lines were shifted. Timestamp logs showed edits after my departure, but tagged with my name. And then came the kicker. Server login data tying the edits to Lyle's personal workstation. He hadn't just framed me in board meetings. He had forged my digital trail, retroactively manipulating records to bury his own tracks. It was all here. Dates, edits, user IDs, and someone inside had slipped it to me. I forwarded the file to my lawyer with a message. We're past coincidence now. By dusk, Nico walked through the door, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. I'm in, he said. They gave my project to an intern and told me to get over the old guard. So yeah, I'm done. He joined Fern and me at the table, where we reviewed the pitch deck for an upcoming commercial property bid, a sleek downtown firm needing a full rebrand and design overhaul. I glanced at our logo in the corner of the slides. It wasn't finished. The font was too narrow, the lines not quite bold enough, but it was ours. You sure we're ready? Fern asked. No, I said, but neither were they when they took my name off the building. They both smiled. I leaned forward, tapping the edge of the screen. Let's build it better than they ever let us. That night, I walked through the office alone, switching off lights room by room. In the hallway, I passed a bulletin board we hadn't filled yet. 1 pushpin held a single sticky note. Reclaim, rebuild, repeat. I left it there. The next time they see my name, it'll be on the contract they lost. The first time I saw our firm's name listed alongside Shipley and Company again, it wasn't in some public takedown or dramatic expose. It was in an email from the City Development Board, announcing the finalist firms for the new Riverwalk Eco Commons project. 3 names. One of them, River and Root Interiors. The other, Shipley and Company. My fingers tightened around the edge of the kitchen counter as I stared at the screen. This was it. Not whispers, not memories, not rumors in coffee shop corners. This was the moment we'd face off, side by side, on merit, pitch, and execution. Nico, I called from the next room. He popped his head into the hallway. They just released the short list. He crossed the floor in 3 steps. I pointed to the name beside ours. Looks like they're not backing off. He smirked. Word is, they're panicking. But by Monday, I realized panic makes people dangerous. The first message came from a former client, someone I'd worked with for 6 years. Her email was terse. I'm so sorry. We're pulling out of our contract. Shipley said you're no longer practicing, that you're facing legal trouble. I hope it's not true. I didn't reply immediately. I couldn't. Not until I checked my junk folder, my server, my logs. Nothing flagged, nothing blocked. They had gotten to her directly. Then came the second. And the third. In one, the client attached a PDF of internal comms forwarded by mistake. It was from a Shipley staffer referencing my name with a red flag. External risk, do not engage. Another came from Darla herself. The subject line read, Friendly reminder, legacy protocols. Inside was one line. We strongly advise avoiding engagement with any designers formerly affiliated with the firm during its transition period. Translation, stay away from my sister, she's poison. By Wednesday, the sabotage wasn't quiet anymore. It was sharpened and strategic. Fern came into my office, pale. I just got a message from Michelle. She's still on the admin team at Shipley. They let go of 3 junior staffers, quietly, no cause. But all 3 had lunch with us last week. They're making examples, I said flatly. Nico walked in, holding his phone. Want to guess what just got posted? He turned the screen. It was a job listing. Junior Creative Lead, Commercial Interiors Division. The exact title he had held. The same pay band, the same requirements. Position open due to department realignment, it read. They said my job was being phased out, Nico muttered. Looks like it's alive and well. We stared at each other, the reality crystallizing. They weren't just trying to block us from clients. They were cleansing every trace we'd ever left behind. Our names, our titles, our existence. Quiet erasure wrapped in corporate policy. Then the biggest blow came Thursday morning. I received a call from Greg Tapley, a major developer with stakes in the Riverwalk project. Mara, I sent an inquiry to your firm's contact form 2 days ago. Never heard back. I never got it, I said, panic crawling up my spine. Can you forward it? He did. But the timestamp? It was there. It had been sent. Nico jumped onto the back end of our site, tracing logs. His face went pale. The message was flagged at the server level, intercepted before it even reached your inbox. What? I whispered. Someone installed a filter on the DNS, your domain host. The IP trace? He paused. Shipley's legal department. They'd hacked into our public pathway. Not technically criminal if done through a shared vendor or masked admin rights, but definitely illegal once proven. My heart thudded as I stared at my laptop screen. This wasn't just sabotage. They were trying to digitally choke my new business before it could breathe. I stood slowly, like something ancient was building in my spine. So that's the game now. I turned to Fern. Get me the name of every client we've lost in the last 10 days. I want timestamps, IP logs, all of it. To Nico. Put Tapley's name at the top of our call list. And back up everything. We're preparing a breach report. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd crumble once they dragged the fight into their territory, into technology and silent sabotage. But here's the thing they forgot. I trained most of the people who now sit in those seats. I built those workflows. I designed those systems. They want to fight? They forgot. I taught them how to win. The buzz started small. Just a passing comment Nico overheard while nursing a coffee at the back of a local business forum. They're pushing proposals like nothing's wrong, but something's off. The numbers feel padded. Nico leaned in casually. You might want to check the vendor list, particularly anything with the name New Edge. Just a tip. That's all it took. By the time he walked out of the venue, 6 conversations had shifted tones. And by evening, I could feel it. The difference in the emails we were getting. Shorter, sharper. Less about pricing, more about documentation. People were asking questions. That night, I stayed at the office late, sifting through every folder, every message chain, every contract that had once passed through my hands. And then my phone lit up. Unknown number. The message was brief. I used to work with Lyle in Chicago. Heard he's at it again. Thought you should see this. Attached were 2 files. One, a signed NDA from an old firm called Aurelian Designs, and the other, a confidential exit report. It listed damages from shell vendor billing, internal fraud warnings, and 3 staff resignations directly linked to Lyle's projects. I clicked through to the last page. Subject, Lyle C. Foster. Terminated by board vote. Settlement sealed under NDA. He'd done this before. He'd gotten away with it before. But this time, he left the wrong fingerprint behind. I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I acted. The next morning, I compiled everything. Nico helped organize the digital trail, time-stamped edits to Shipley records, the vendor billing irregularities, the e-signature logs forged under my father's name, and the NDA from Chicago? That was the smoking gun. It mirrored the same shell vendor setup, same fake address, same P.O. box. But I didn't send it to the board. I'd already seen what silence looked like from them. Instead, I drafted a message addressed to 11 key names: developers, commercial architecture partners, long-term collaborators, clients. Subject: before you renew, you deserve transparency. I added no commentary, just attachments. Let the facts speak. By noon, the storm had landed. One email chain was forwarded to us, a frantic message from Lyle to the Shipley board. This is coordinated. She's trying to dismantle everything. She's bitter. She's unstable. She's making it personal. Darla replied curtly, "Why is this the first we're seeing the Chicago file?" By 3 p.m., we were getting consultation requests from 2 developers who had just suspended their Shipley contracts pending internal review. And then, silence. A deep, trembling kind. The kind that always came before collapse. When I stepped into the office kitchen to grab a coffee, Fern was scrolling her phone with a smirk. "Did you see this?" she asked. I walked over. On the screen was a screenshot from a private business Slack channel. Avoid Shipley & Company until further notice. Ongoing audit, massive liability risk. Heard it from someone close. Nico leaned against the doorway behind me, arms crossed. "I guess they're not taking your name lightly anymore." I didn't respond. My eyes were still on that final message from Lyle. It's all her. She planned this. No, I hadn't planned it. They had planned the theft, the cover-up, the erasure. All I did was refuse to be erased. All I did was show them what they built and who they built it on. I wasn't out for revenge. I just needed them to stop pretending I never mattered. After the inbox explosion and 3 sleepless nights that followed, something unexpected happened. The silence returned. But this time, it felt earned. We weren't fighting anymore. We were building. River and Root had outgrown its modest launch pad. The new studio was open, humming with laughter, the scent of fresh paint and eucalyptus, and the rhythmic tapping of ideas being born. Sunlight washed through the tall glass windows, catching on a brass plate that read, "Maura Shipley, founding partner." I paused in the hallway that morning, watching Fern show a new intern where the supply closet was. Nico was huddled in the meeting room, sketching revisions on a whiteboard, earbuds in. My office door was open, flowers on the windowsill, wild peonies. Someone had remembered. I smiled, not the kind of smile you give when you've won something, the kind you give when you've come home. We had 3 signed contracts on the board, 2 more in negotiation, and a feature request from Colorado Modern Interiors, all without a single paid ad. It turns out when you stop fighting to be heard by the wrong people, the right ones find you, and they stay. Darla and Lyle, meanwhile, were unraveling in slow motion. Word came down through a friend in the legal community. Lyle had stepped away from Shipley & Company, pending further investigation. He hadn't even logged out of the company server before HR froze his credentials. Last anyone saw, he was back in Chicago, renting a co-working desk under a different LLC name. Again. Shipley & Company had lost 2 of its top commercial clients. The board had suspended new bids, no press statements, no PR spin. And Darla? Her Instagram, once a curated reel of CEO brunches and polished press releases, had gone dark. Someone said she'd gone on a retreat in Sedona. Someone else said she was staying with a cousin in Boulder. No one knew for sure. Honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't watching to see if she apologized. I knew she wouldn't. But the consequences? Those came whether you posted about them or not. Later that week, I drove up to Estes Park, a small bouquet in the passenger seat. Dad was sitting on the porch in a wool cardigan, sipping lukewarm tea and pretending he wasn't tired. The oxygen tank beside him hissed quietly. "I heard you made the paper," he said with a faint grin. "Just the local section," I replied, handing him the flowers. We sat in silence for a while, watching a pair of squirrels wage war over a tree limb. Then he handed me a small envelope. His fingers trembled as he let go. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, yellowed at the edges. A note, in his handwriting. "You were the best part of what I built. I'm sorry I didn't say it when it mattered. No grand speech, no follow-up." He looked down at his tea like the conversation hadn't happened. I didn't cry. Instead, I leaned forward, rested my hand on his, and whispered, "Thank you." That was enough. Later that afternoon, back in town, I met with a reporter from the Fort Collins Tribune. She was young, eager, and slightly nervous. I told her she didn't need to record me. I wasn't there to roast anyone. I just wanted the truth on the record. "You've had quite a few people reach out since the fallout," she said, notebook in hand. "Do you think Shipley & Company can recover?" I smiled, not bitter, just honest. "I hope they do," I said, "but I won't be waiting for them to." She blinked, then scribbled something down quickly. I imagined she'd bold that line for emphasis. As the interview wrapped, she turned to me one last time. "One thing I've been wondering, with everything you went through, why didn't you just walk away from the industry?" I took a breath, looked out the cafe window at the sun hitting the rooftops just right. Because I never needed to destroy anything, I said softly. I just needed to build something that remembered me. That evening, I stayed at the office a little later than usual. I walked the floors, touched the walls, checked in on the renderings Nico had pinned to the board. And before I left, I scrawled one line across our mission statement chalk wall, right below the team mantra. You can try to cut a woman out of the story, but if she builds her own pages, you'll read her name eventually. Some stories don't end with revenge, they end with clarity. Maura didn't fight to destroy the people who wronged her. She rebuilt herself in full view, proving that legacy isn't something you're handed, it's something you earn, even if you have to fight for every inch of it. Have you ever been erased from a place you helped build, or had to walk away just to reclaim your voice? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters too. And if you found power in Maura's journey, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more stories coming. Stories about family, betrayal, healing, and the quiet strength it takes to rise.